Hello, readers, super fans, and everything in between. I am Nathan Marchand, and yes, I am a super fan, and I am a writer, and I am trying to catch up a little bit with doing But I Digress episodes because I need to start taking my YouTube channel, as I've been saying for a long time, a little more seriously, get some more content up on there. I don't just have to do podcasting. But I have a feeling that this is tonight's subject. This will not be the first time I talk about it because I have a couple of interested parties who want me to podcast about this. And if you saw the video I did a few months ago where I broke down the first trailer for this movie, because yes, we're talking about James Gunn's Superman, you'll know that I gushed over it and talked about how this would be within the purview, arguably, for at least the Monster Island Film Vault, my Kaiju podcast. So we're about to get into it. I will admit I'm rushing into this. It is Tuesday, the 8th. This movie is not supposed to be out for a couple of more days, but because I am an Amazon Prime member, I was able to go to the early screening that was tonight, and I figured, you know what? I normally probably would have just pre-recorded this, but I'm going to do it live because I want to be one of the first people who gets a video out talking about this movie. And it's also pertinent because if you go back through the catalog of my other videos, you'll know that way back in 2013, I did a video on Man of Steel. I'm vamping right now, in case you're wondering. I'm vamping right now to let people jump into the chat and get situated and all of that. So, and again, I'm going over James Gunn's Superman tonight. But I saw Man of Steel. I did this whole elaborate video. I wore my Christopher Reeve cosplay. I'm not doing that tonight, but I am wearing one of my favorite Superman t-shirt because what you can't tell is that, it's basically the costume, and the best part is it has a little Velcro cape. I don't wear this very often because it's kind of strange as as t-shirts go, and it would look a little weird. So I just save it for special occasions like tonight. Alrighty. So yes, as I was saying, I saw Man of Steel. I was remarkably kind to it. I look back on my thoughts on that movie and I think to myself, why was I so nice to it? Because Man of Steel is a movie that I have been falling kind of out of love with as time has been going on. The longer, the more time passes, the less I like it, and the less I like a lot of the follow-ups to it, like Batman v Superman, Dawn of Justice, and and Justice League, although I did like the Snyder Cut when I saw it and all that. And I know there's a big hullabaloo with the Snyder Bros in this movie. I won't be getting into that tonight. I know that there have been attempts, as usual with Hollywood movies anymore, to politicize it. I'm not getting into that because honestly, any of these so-called politics that even James Gunn is trying to say inspire what he was doing here with this movie, I didn't really see in this. There's definitely politics in it, but it's pertinent to the plot, having to, but it's not the sort of things that James Gunn is necessarily talking about. So I won't be getting into that either tonight. I will simply be evaluating this movie on its own merits. I will do my best to be objective because I am a fanboy, as you can tell. I'm not only a writer, I'm a comic book reader, hopefully soon to be a comic book writer. I love superheroes. Superman is one of my favorites. And I went into this excited, but I was also trying to temper my expectations because there were things I had my doubts about going into this. I wasn't sure James Gunn was the right guy to do this, and I wasn't sure with some of the things that they were choosing to include to try to make this different, and I was concerned about there being too many characters, and like I said, I had a laundry list of concerns. But Before I start getting into that, let's see who we have here in the chat. And if you haven't said anything in the chat yet, feel free to make your presence known. So, first up, we have, excuse me, my co-host on Henshin Power V3, one of my other podcasts. If you like superheroes, particularly the transforming variety, go check this out. But Jake Cambrick in the house. Hello, Superman. I like to think of Superman sometimes. And then one of my super fans, Edwin Gonzalez, the man whose rant masters are his Superboy Prime auditions. That is several layers of nerd right there, Mr. Gonzalez. And let me see, he's got a bunch more comments here. Glad this is making a comeback. Hope after this, the Fantastic Four, if you cover superhero stuff, it could be like some kind of international stuff. Got a small list, and luckily some are free or streamed. I will probably do a little live stream like this for Fantastic Four as well. Not only because it's also a superhero movie, but also because I'm Johnny Storm, baby. If you listen to the Cypher audio dramas, yes, I play Johnny Storm on Avengers the Audio Drama whenever they have crossovers with the Avengers. Let's see. Cape like the guy in Fred Claus. Let me see. Jacob, Brandon Routh was the best Superman. I disagree with that, but I do like Brandon Routh. I do think Brandon Routh is criminally underrated as Superman. But I'm also, weirdly enough, a bit of a defender of Superman Returns, but that's not tonight's subject. That is not tonight's subject. Now let's see what else. The Snyder Bros are worse than Mad Dogs. Oh, wheelsies. Let me see some more. Jake and Edwin are going crazy in the chat right now. James Gunn saw -1 and said, maybe I'll make a good movie one day. Let's see. Wow! Throwing Mr. Gunn under the bus, sir. He's made other movies that were good before this. Funny enough, he's kind of touched upon Superman before. He didn't direct this, but he was the producer on a movie that came out a few years ago. It was a horror movie. I never got around to seeing it, but now I'm a little curious to see it. It's called Brightburn. It's basically, what if Superman was evil? In this case, he was a superpowered. It's a superpowered child who's doing horrendous things. So it's a strange choice. It's so obviously Superman. If you watch the trailers and stuff, that I'm amazed DC didn't sue. All I'm saying. Let's see. Edwin again here. If you count inspired covers, Radiant Black is certainly the massive Superman. You are such a huge fan of Radiant Black. You talk about that a lot, especially in the Discord and stuff. But when they emulated the Spider-Man versus Superman cover and Rogue Sun is the Spider-Man, yeah, that was a really nice cover too. We shared that in Discord as well. Hey, it's my friend OmniViewer. Great to see you in the chat. I invest in crypto. Oh, where's the button? Oh, sir. I'm sure you do. I'm looking forward to seeing your review of this, Ryan. I'm assuming that probably won't be until Thursday, maybe Friday, because I don't know if you're an Amazon Prime member or able to see it tonight. But I let you know beforehand, I will be getting into spoilers eventually. I will put a warning up when I do that for those who do not want to hear spoilers. Just an FYI. See more, Edwin. CW Superman was great. One they detached from his cousin show. Identity reveal was done better and actually stuck, unlike the comics. Yeah, I wish I had watched more of Superman and Lois, but I had fallen out of interest in the CW DC shows quite a bit, so I wasn't in a big rush to see it. But I heard good things about it. I also heard bad things about it. We live in a time and place. We live in an era where I don't know who to believe anymore when it comes to this. Although I also find myself thinking, like, I'd rather just read comics. I don't know. So, comment here from Jake. I think he's commenting on my Brandon Routh comment. Brandon Superman lived in an island filled with kryptonite, which other live action version did that. I see your point there, sir. I do see your point there. All right. So, as I said, tonight's subject, I'm going to have some visuals to go along with this because, of course, I do. This is a live stream. This is how we work around here. So, let me see. All right. So, tonight's subject. And, I think I'm going to go picture. Oh, whoa, whoa. That looks dope. That looks dope. I don't like that. Oh, whoa. Oh, learning things about how streaming networks. You see. Oh, what? 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 Yeah, I think we'll stick with that. I'm trying to make sure I've got this all figured out. All right, so this will be my spoiler-free thoughts here. I am very fresh off of seeing this movie. I saw it. It's 11:11 right now as I speak, and I saw this 4 hours ago at 7 o'clock for the Amazon Prime screen. Now, I will admit it was a little pricier than I would have liked it to be, but it was also IMAX. It was a special screening, and so I'm guessing that definitely jacked it up. It was definitely worth seeing in IMAX. I'm very happy to say that Fort Wayne has an IMAX theater here in town. I did have to rush a little to get there because I was working on a freelancing project before I left for a friend, and so I got there basically just in time. And but thankfully, I was able to just walk in there, scan my ticket, find my seat. Problems. There weren't very many trailers beforehand, which I really appreciated. Funny enough, there was a Fantastic Four Steps trailer, which made me snicker a little bit. We're playing the trailer for the competition. Yeah. So everything got started. To my surprise, it was a pretty enthusiastic crowd. People applauded at the start of the movie, and for what it's worth, they applauded at the end of the movie. So make of that what you will. So it was certainly an enthusiastic crowd. But all of that to say, although I should also mention, it was a pretty, it wasn't a rambunctious crowd. They weren't being noisy or anything during the movie, except at moments where, you would laugh or something, because there is humor in this movie. But all that to say, it was a very good theater experience for me. So it's got that going for it. But as for my spoiler-free thoughts, well, we got someone else in the chat here. Christopher Sean, is it good? And he says, cool. I'm about to get into that. Like I said, these are the spoiler-free thoughts. So unless you saw it tonight at Amazon for the Amazon Prime screening, you tune out. Tune out. No Mortal Kombat trailer. No, there wasn't a Mortal Kombat trailer. Is there a new Mortal Kombat trailer? I may have to go look that up after that. But my spoiler-free thoughts. As of now, because like I said, I felt good after Man of Steel, but then fell out of love with it as time went on. Is this movie good? I would say it's good, but I hesitate to call it great. Which is a little disappointing for me because I wanted it to be great. This needed to be great because this is supposed to be this. Basically, James Gunn is rebooting. Yes, Creature Commandos exists, and there is a cameo in this movie that complicates things a bit in terms of continuity. I won't get into that until we get to the spoilers, but yeah. But for all intents and purposes, this is a massive reboot of the entire DC shared universe. Gunn's already got, like a 5-year plan and everything that he wants to, make and all of that. So, like I said, I would say it's great. But it's not, excuse me, it's good, but it's not great. I do think at the moment anyway, I'm happier with this than I currently am for Man of Steel. Nothing against Henry Cavill. I think he was a great Superman, just given the wrong scripts. If he had been allowed to be a proper Superman, we may not have David Cornsway, right? But there are things that I will get into where the movie really does shine. Uh, the the biggest strength that I think it has is it completely embraces the comic booky nature of what we have. It is unabashedly comic booky, like I said, almost to the point of being a little cheesy at points. David Cornsweet definitely plays Clark and Superman very earnest, which I do really appreciate. And uh, his performance, I do think, is excellent. And like other Superman actors before him, he's got some acting chops, and he pumped some iron, got into shape for this. He looks great. Not the biggest fan of the costume. It's not a terrible costume, but it's certainly not my favorite. And it doesn't it doesn't do Corn Sweat any justice. But then again, but the weird thing is, unlike most superhero movies, this isn't really a spoiler, but there isn't a scene that really showcases how good a shape David Cornsweet got into for this movie. There's no mandatory shirtless scene like there usually is in one of these superhero movies, where which I always joke like this is the token, oh not token, but the mandatory look how buff I got for this movie scene. That's not here, and like I said, this suit does not show off Torrance Sweat's physique at all. But and I have some of my own quibbles with the design of it and such. I do appreciate the fact that they brought the red trunks back because I'm a massive fan of the red trunks. Not because it looks stupid or anything. I know some people look stupid, but know your Superman history like I do. Trunks were inspired by circus strongmen, and I would say from an aesthetic standpoint, it really gives this costume the color balance that it desperately needs. You take the trunks away, and it feels a little off without them. But we're not here to debate art, necessarily, characters or whatever. We're not here to debate. So, so that's David Cornsweet. I was mostly happy with that. There were some issues, I think, with the script that prompted him to do a different sort of performance at points that I have a little bit of issue with. The rest of the performances are pretty solid. I particularly liked Nicholas Hoult as Lex Luthor. He is the entire movie is what's interesting about the entire movie, and I think Lex Luthor is a good illustration of this, is that while tonally this movie is definitely going for the Silver Age. So we're talking like the 50s to maybe the early 70s. The era of the comics authority and when things got really silly and Superman's doing ridiculous things like shooting rainbows out of his fingers and things like that. So this pre-crisis Silver Age Superman, it's definitely going for that in terms of tone, I would say. And a lot of the elements that it's using come from that era of the comics. But what's weird is that there's all these smatterings of other bits, not only of Superman lore, but also eras of Superman. So while we've got a very Silver Age style Superman, particularly if you throw Crypto in it, because Crypto was much more of a thing in the Silver Age pre-crisis. But and we'll get to Crypto. But Lex in this is very much the post-crisis go and forward incarnation of Lex, who is the evil businessman and is viciously jealous of Superman and distrustful of him and wants to take him out because he thinks it's the best thing for humanity. So it's interesting to think, that there's these juxtapositions. Lois is, I would probably say, characterization of Lois doesn't really change much, but from era to era necessarily. She usually just reflects different attitudes about, about women, I would say. But I would say she's a little bit more modern, but in terms of characterization. And Miss Brosnahan, is that her name? That is her name. Yeah, Rachel Brosnahan. I hope I said that correctly. She does a pretty solid job. I would say as Lois. I would rank her a little bit higher on my list of Lois actresses. Probably, I might. Do I would put her above. I can't remember her name, but the actress from Superman Returns. I probably put her above her. Not sure about Amy Adams or Terry Hatcher, also because I haven't watched either of them in a while. I haven't seen Superman and Lois. I can't really, not enough anyway, to comment. For me, Lois is always going to be Margot Kidder. But I'm kind of telegraphing that, why, for me, the benchmark for a Superman movie is always going to be Christopher Reeve, and it's particularly those first two Superman movies. Although I would qualify that by saying the original Superman and the Donner cut of two, but that's so I'm kind of telegraphing a little bit. That's the definitive Superman on screen, anyway, for me. Yes, Jake, Miss Brosnahan is hot and quite so and they utilize that at points in this movie, not in a tasteless way, but like, really, really, Jake, you don't like the Trunks? I don't know if we can be friends anymore. Anyway, taking a few comments, but yeah, so it's this weird mismatch of elements. I was concerned that this movie would be overstuffed. It's not as overstuffed as I thought it would be, but there's a lot of characters in here, and it definitely feels like it was designed for fans primarily because they're expecting that you're going to know who a lot of these characters, who like the really important details about these characters. There's a lot of exposition in this. Sometimes the exposition is handled a little weirdly, but they keep throwing stuff in here. This is very much a lived-in world. This is not an origin story. We get like the most we get of Superman's origin is some text at the beginning that was handled, I thought, pretty cleverly, but I won't get into too many details about that because that might be considered spoilers. But I liked how that was handled and written. So this is Superman after being Superman for a couple of years, and he's hit a major hurdle in what he's doing because it starts off by saying like this is that Superman just had a fight and it's the first time he's ever lost, and then we go from there. We have the Fortress of Solitude in this. It's definitely nobody can get away from the Fortress of Solitude design that we saw in the original Richard Donner Christopher Reeve because it's the exact same thing here. Now, they integrate some more, like I said, pre-crisis elements with the door. They don't have the giant key. I was waiting for the giant key, but no giant key. But there's a lot. So there's a lot of elements that are thrown in here. It's not overwhelmingly overstuffed. Thankfully, it's still primarily focused on Superman, on Clark. I know some people thought that they wasted Lois. I don't think Lois was wasted in this. It is a slightly different take on Lois than, than we've seen before, at least on screen. This is a Lois who, yes, she is brash and she's confident and assertive and all of those things as Lois has always been, even going all the way back to the 30s. But there's a certain Lois is also unsure about certain things, namely relationships, which it becomes a subplot our characters have to deal with, or her and Clark have to deal with specifically, which is a little bit different. She also just knows that Clark is Superman. Like they skip a bunch of stuff, and I think I understand why they skip a bunch of things with her figuring out the identity and the origin and all that, because they're like, at this point, who doesn't know the basics anymore about Superman? We all know who Superman is and where he came from. We know who Lois is and the basics of that. And they just get around the fact that there was this will they, won't they thing for 50 plus years in the comics. And it's like if Lois is as good a reporter as she is, how does she not figure it out for as long as she did? Well, they just get around that. They're not even playing with that anymore. And I commend them for it. So just get around. But the trade-off that you have with that is that because this is a lived-in world, that's a lot of exposition you got to get in there. And as the starting point for a universe, it does feel a little overwhelming. It's not like you go back to 2008 with Iron Man, where we only knew that there was, for all intents and purposes, there was one superhero, and that was Iron Man. Now, as the MCU went on, we find out that there were other superheroes who existed before that, namely Steve Rogers' Captain America. So there were others before Iron Man, but for all intents and purposes, Iron Man was the first big superhero that people were paying attention to in the modern world, and then more heroes started showing up as time went on, and we started getting more movies. But in this one, I'm gonna switch to another image here, so so you can see what I'm talking about. But we've already got other heroes. Yeah, we've already got other heroes in this universe, and I'm not entirely sure how to feel about them. So it's the Justice Gang. Now, when we see them at first, there's only three of them, and this isn't a spoiler. We've seen all these characters in in the trailers and all that. It was fun seeing Nathan Fillion in this, doing what Nathan Fillion does best. For a long time, he was a fan cast for not Kyle Rayner, it was Hal Jordan, and I would have loved him as Hal Jordan. He did play Hal Jordan in an animated movie once, but now he's Guy Gardner, which is kind of weird, but I get it. And for those who said, "Well, that haircut looks awful," mild spoiler, but there's a joke at his expense about the hair. So they do. They do. And Mr. Terrific as well. The thing I will say this about the gentleman who plays Mr. Terrific. I'm gonna look him up here. That means oh, they had Eve Teschmacher, so we kind of have Miss Teschmacher again. I didn't realize how I was Teschmacher, but it actually makes sense. But let me see. Oh, come on. Where's Mr. Terrific? Why is this cast difficult? Wikipedia, why do you family? Oh, there it is. Michael Holt. Michael Holt. So Michael Holt does an excellent job as Mr. Terrific, but I'm going to be honest with you. There were points. This is a weird comparison to make. I really do think, and this is just a me thing. His performance reminded me of Robert Downey Jr. in Tropic Thunder when he wouldn't break character wearing all the for lack of a better way to put it, the blackface makeup. I don't know why. I'm hoping that's just a me thing. Would have been funny if it was Robert Downey Jr. doing the exact same thing, but that would not fly now for obvious reasons. One of which being he's a Marvel actor, so they're not going to get him in DC. No way. Not to mention it would balloon the budget to we don't even want to think about how much that would be. So all that to say, we already have several other heroes in this, and once you throw, you know what? That's a spoiler because there are other characters who make appearances in this, and if you know your DC comics, you're gonna know who they are. But I won't get into that because I think those would technically be spoilers. So, like I said, it's a little overstuffed, so I think that kind of breaks it down. And then there's some other things that happen with the script that I think bring it down a bit for me, but those are spoiler territory, so I'm not gonna get into that. But, yeah, like I said, if you prefer something with a lighter tone and an earnest Superman, you're gonna have a good time with this one. If you prefer the previous iteration of of the DCU with that darker take on Superman that or whatever, the Henry Cavill version, you're probably not gonna have a good time with this. This is definitely meant to be a crowd pleaser. It is in many ways feels like it's a response to what came before, but at the same time, it also feels like it's trying to have its cake and eat it too. There are moments where I was thinking of specifically Batman v Superman, as we saw in some of the trailers, because the plot, not really a spoiler, I would say, the plot revolves around Lex Luthor trying to ruin Superman's reputation, and he has a modicum of success in this. That's why you see people turning on him and questioning his motives, which is very much in line with what Zack Snyder was doing. So at points, this feels like the bizarre love child of the original Christopher Reeve movies and the Snyder films, while also throwing a various comic book elements on top of it. I will say James Gunn does not get as ridiculous as he normally does because he likes wild stuff. If you look at his filmography, he came up with Trauma, which does some of the most absolutely ridiculous stuff you've ever seen. But he doesn't go all the way in with this. And unlike what, well, I won't say this. The Guardians of the Galaxy movies were able to avoid ruining themselves by undercutting their drama with ill-placed humor because James Gunn knew how to keep humor in there without undercutting drama, but he doesn't really do that here. There is still humor in it, but it doesn't come at the expense of the drama. So, yeah, it's not like I said, it's not great, and there are some things that rub me the wrong way about the movie. But like I said, that's going to require getting into spoiler territory. There are some thematic things in here that I don't know how to feel about. Oh, unlike in some of the other movies, Clark still has both of his parents in this. So both Mom and Pa Kent are in this, which is nice. And there is a nice scene between Clark and John that I really did appreciate. So let me think here. Is that all the non-spoilery stuff I want to get into? I think so. I think so. So I'll grab a few more comments here before I move on to my spoiler section. No, there was no Sonic 4 trailer. Sorry. I don't know what you mean by it's more family friendly, but sure. No, it's not boring. Edwin, the soundtrack, bunch of great songs. Has Gunn gathered a bunch of great songs again. The soundtrack was pretty solid. There weren't as many say, pop songs thrown in there as you would expect. Although if you go on Spotify, I found out today while I was driving to theater that exclusively on Spotify, Gunn assembled some playlists for some of the characters in the movie that he would use while he was writing it. Crypto might save it. For some people, my Crypto was cute. I will say that he was amusing. That is a completely new element that we have not seen before, and at least in a live action Superman movie. I know they had like Crypto and the Super Pets a few years ago, but yeah. But actually throwing Crypto in here, and it was inspired by James Gunn's own dog and things like that. So that was for all the dog owners out there. You'll have a good time with Crypto. Crypto didn't feel as superfluous as I was worried he was going to be, and not quite the Deus Ex Machina either, even though he does have a really nice moment. So, Omni talking with Jake. If you don't like the underwear, does that mean you go creature commando? That was a good one, Ryan. That was a good one. Let's see. Let's hope the other Madam Web actress get okay. So Isabella Merced really got an upgrade in the most forgettable Madam Web leadingly, and that's yeah, for sure. Jake says, I really want a Green Lantern movie with Jon Stewart and Kyle Rayner. I think a lot of people do. Let's see. Zaz looked great. Guy who played a certain character in the movie played Zaz in Gotham. Righty. I didn't watch enough Gotham, apparently. Let's see. More from Jake. I love the dark and gritty, but I do like lighter superhero movies. Yeah, for sure. Let's see. More Edwin. Might not be able to see the whole stream early shift, so gotta hit the hay early. Prepared some of these comments in advance. That's cool. I, if you haven't, I'm about to get into the spoiler territory, so if you haven't seen the movie yet, probably wouldn't finish listening anyway. Hey, it's my friend Sergio, listening from work, ya nerd. Yeah, thanks, man. Like I said, I'm about to get to spoilers, so if you don't want to hear spoilers, shut it off. All right, well, time for me to tap up before the spoilers say farewell for now. Thanks. And, well, I'm going to head out. I have a long drive tonight. Yeah, yeah, we both do. She does. So, yeah. So, my final thoughts. If you're a comic book fan, you're gonna feel at home here. Like I said, it feels like I don't know if I mentioned this, but it feels like one of those DC animated movies that's made specifically for fans. So they expect that the fans are gonna know what a lot of the plot details and character details and all that already are. So they don't necessarily get into all that much explaining for it. So yeah, so there's that. I do think there's enough in there if you're less initiated. If you're uninitiated on DC Comics, you should be fine. Is it the greatest Superman movie? No, I don't think it's the greatest Superman movie. But at the same time, I don't know if it's possible to do that again. Is this going to be the springboard that DC needs? I don't know yet. That's why I'm honestly not comfortable giving this movie a score or anything. Not usually in the habit of giving scores to movies anyway, but I need time to sit with it for now. Oh, by the way, there is a kaiju in it, and the kaiju fight's actually really nice. And it again feels like Superman is actually trying to pay attention to collateral damage, almost again in response to Zack Snyder with Man of Steel, as he goes out of his way to make sure nobody gets hurt during this kaiju fight, even tries to keep the kaiju alive. Which is interesting because that puts him at odds with Justice Day because they're not worried about keeping it alive. All right. Anyway, so got all that out of the way. So I will now get into spoiler territory. So go find it here. You have been warned. Spoiler warning. I should make a sounder for the spoiler warning. So here we go. Here's your last one. All right. So I do wanna talk a little bit here. Let me find it. I do wanna talk a little bit here about Orin Sweat. I think that's the first place I wanna go to. He certainly looks the part, and he fills the suit well, even though I think the suit's a little too baggy. But I was happy with his overall with his performance. Like I said, he looks and he sounds the part too. But there are moments with the script that left me a little disappointed, and at points kept scratching my head. I don't blame him for this. I blame the script for this, because I think that's where most of this movie's issues really come into is with the script. There were some points where Gunn made decisions with the script that honestly bugged me a little. And one of the things that irked me a little bit with Corin Sweat, that you don't really get this impression in the trailers, but how do I want to say this? Gunn has said that he wanted to depower his, wanted to depower his Superman a little bit, which is not the first time this has happened. There have been other adaptations that have depowered Superman a little bit, just because, let's be honest, depending on who's writing Superman, he can get a bit OP, and that's putting it politely. But I prefer my Superman to be a bit more stoic than what we got from Corin Sweat here. Now, I know what you're saying. What are you talking about, man? There were points where Christopher Reeve got super emotional and stuff too. Yes, I understand that. But it felt a little more earned, and it stood out because he was normally stoic, or I guess for lack of a better word, happy. Here, he has moments where he kind of comes unglued a little bit. Now, one of them was when he was doing that interview with Lois, and Lois, being a good reporter and also being his girlfriend, knows how to kind of jab him a little bit. And when she starts bringing up things like his reputation, especially online, which the whole thing about what's going on online is a big sticking point, I know, for some people as well with this movie. He comes a little bit unglued when she mentions some of the insulting hashtags that are being spread about him. It's only for a moment, but it's enough to be like, really? I would think you'd be a little beyond that. Now, I understand. I've had to go on a little bit of a journey myself when it comes to getting over things like that, when I've also had people trying to ruin my reputation. So I get it. And I think this one is a little bit more forgivable for me because he is with someone who knows him well and he feels comfortable with, and he can be a bit more vulnerable. But I wasn't necessarily expecting that. And it was a little disappointing just how much it bothered him, even for a moment. And then there's a point later, and I think this is one of the scenes that was released before the movie came out, where he bursts into Lex's office and just starts wrecking everything because he wants the dog. And I'm just like, I get it. It's your dog. But do you really have to be like on the verge of just wrecking house, yelling at people and all of that, barely keeping yourself under control, and having these emotional outbursts over the dog? Not really seen a previous, or at least on screen, Superman react that way, especially one who's been doing this for a while, is an adult. It's not like Smallville. Tom Welling went on Smallville where he would get angry on there, but it's because he's a teenager and hormones and all that fun stuff. So those brought it down a little bit for me. there were some weird choices with how the dialogue was written for Corn Sweat sometimes as Superman, almost to the point of being corny. I mean, I heard some of the early reactions and the test screenings are like comparing this to Captain America: The First Avenger, and I get that in terms of tone and such like that. We have a very earnest hero here, but Steve Rogers, as played by Chris Evans, was a very earnest character, but he wasn't being all gosh gee willikers like Corn Sweat was at many points throughout this movie, which was just kind of bizarre. Now, I know the original movie, there's a little bit of a joke about that, but it felt subtler and not, I don't want to say stereotypical. I don't know, but it also pointed out just kind of one of those little differences between country folk and city folk. But I don't know, but like you might be thinking of I'm talking about when Clark Kent says swell and Lois looks at him funny. It's like nobody says that anymore. Like that's supposed to be an old timey word, even though when I watched that as a kid, I was like, people still say that. Why was it old timey in the 70s? Whatever on that. But he's literally doing like censoring himself and saying things like, oh, darn it, and oh gosh, and golly. And I'm like, what? Especially when he's Superman, he does this. It's just strange. I don't know what to do that. Funny enough, well, no, the emotional outbursts happen when he's Superman too. But he does seem to be a little bit more collected when he's Superman. Public persona and all that, I suppose. But yeah, I just wasn't sure what to do with that. I just thought it was strange. But like I said, I lay that at the feet of the script and not necessarily the actor in this case. Let's see. What is well, I've already talked about her, so I may as well have her picture up here for at least a moment. But yeah, with Lois here. I don't know if I really have any spoilery things to get into with this one. She's a solid Lois. She's a really solid Lois. And I was afraid that they would go a bit overboard with her and make her into a girl boss or something. And they don't do that. It's such a tired character archetype anymore. And it's just not resonating with people. But thankfully, they don't go that route. They very wisely do not go that route with her. I appreciated that. So, yeah, here's Crypto. So, Crypto, he's adorable. I will say that. He's not some obnoxious, useless character. He ends up being used as a hostage later on. It wasn't Lois, interestingly. Lois doesn't really get imperiled in this. It's the dog who does. Now, it's not to say that Lois is never in danger. She throws herself into danger all the time still in this. But she's not really the one that needs rescued in the end. It's the freaking dog. So, yeah. There you go on that. And let's see. All right. Metamorpho. I don't think it's really, I don't know if it's a spoiler or not, but I'm going to keep it over here anyway. Metamorpho kind of comes out of nowhere in this. Because we find out, just to show you how petty Lex Luthor is, he made a pocket dimension to house a prison that, yes, has people, because he's got deals with multiple governments. He's basically, the whole plot revolves around him basically trying to fund a war. Often, I think it's supposed to be Eastern Europe. Definitely looks like it was inspired by the whole Russia-Ukraine conflict. And he's selling weapons, and technology, basically trying to keep the war going. That because we find out later, it's so that they were going to, the country that was to be conquered, they were going to give him half of the country, and he was going to make a ton of money off of it and basically start a utopia because he's got a cult of personality with people who would, yeah, be with it. What is this? B best times. We are in the spoiler section now, sir. Yeah, I just left the theater for the sneak peek. It was fantastic. We are in the spoiler section. I have the spoiler warning on screen. So, I have thoroughly warned people that you have already seen the movie, so we should be good. So, but not only is he housing prisoners sent to him by the governments, actual dangerous criminals, he's also using it as his personal prison for people like his ex-girlfriends. That is a level of petty I just boggled my mind a little bit, to be honest. But I guess it's sort of in keeping with the tone they're going with. Feels very pre-crisis, even though this is definitely more the post-crisis Lex. They're definitely giving him some pre-crisis characteristics, I would say. So, yeah, but Metamorpho just happens to be there because the way that they account for how there are all these metahumans, and I didn't bring this up for the beginning, which I thought was kind of clever. It said 3 centuries ago, metahumans appeared. 3 decades ago, Superman crashed on this planet as a baby. 3 years ago, he revealed himself to the world as Superman. 3 weeks ago, he intervened and blah, blah. They kept going all the way down to, 3 days, 3 hours, 3 minutes. And then the movie starts. So metahumans have been around for 300 years. So that's why they're just like, oh, people are already here. So here's Metamorpho, and he can do things like copy elements, including kryptonite, because I guess we don't have any kryptonite anymore. So instead of just having kryptonite, they have him be a kryptonite man and make kryptonite to keep Superman at bay in this pocket dimension prison. Okay. Now they use it because we find out later that Metamorpho has a son and is being held hostage, and that becomes a bit of a centerpiece for one of the action sequences, which I should have mentioned. The action sequences here did remind me a bit of what we've seen before in things like Man of Steel and all of that, but a bit less chaotic compared to the others. And I found myself enjoying these a bit more than what we had before in Man of Steel and such. So, I'll give it that. So, Metamorpho was an interesting choice. Definitely felt like he was thrown in there for comic fans, which is cool and all, but it's still, I don't know, still a little strange to me throwing him in there when they could have just had actual kryptonite. I don't know. It's making the universe feel bigger very early on because this is the first movie in our new shared universe. I didn't hate Metamorpho. He ends up joining the Justice Gang. That's a running joke that, that's a terrible name and nobody but Guy Gardner likes the name, except him, which is why even though Guy wasn't going to let him join, he said, oh, Justice Gang, that's a cool name. And he's like, okay, you're in. So there's a big joke about that. So you got that. Let's see, what else do I have? Yeah. So much was said about what Lex Luthor was attempting to do here. I understand why some people think that it seems weirdly and stupidly modern with him using social media to ruin Superman's reputation. And my counter argument to that was that this is not new for Lex. He was using the media to do it before, but so now he's just using arguably the tools of the day. It's just that because social media is not quote unquote official sources like the regular media, the traditional media, and people typically use it for petty things. It seems pettier by comparison, but like I said, Lex is kind of a petty a-hole in this movie. Well, and the rumors are true. He has a legion of monkeys with, I don't know, like these brain enhancing things on their heads, typing out bad things about Superman. It definitely feels like a bit of a commentary on modern social media, and Gunn himself has been the target of it. He was the target of it several years ago when people tried to cancel him, and the Snyder Bros have been attacking him as he's been trying to make this movie. So some have interpreted this as his way of kind of hitting back, and I understand why people might say that. I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt and saying that, one, it's a little bit of a joke. The whole, if you have a monkey randomly smack a typewriter, what's the likelihood you're going to get Shakespeare? It's one of those thought experiments. So I thought it was interesting from that. It, again, feels very Silver Age in this. It's a very Silver Age thing to do. And again, feels like a bit of a commentary because we know bot farms are a thing. And he basically said, like, yeah, this is my bot farm. So, yeah. And he does lose his cool at points, too. It feels a little bit more earned. I'm trying to decide if I think I would prefer my Lex to be a little more stoic as well. I'm not saying that he can't be passionate. And I will definitely take Nicholas Hoult over that goofball that they had in Batman v Superman. I can't even remember his name now. The not Zuckerberg. It's Jesse Eisenberg. That's who it was. I'll definitely take Holt over Eisenberg because he was just obnoxious and kind of pretentious at points. But at least here, I'm not getting those vibes from him. Is it my favorite take on Lex on screen? Probably not as great as the late Gene Hackman was in the role. I would probably give it to, what's his name? Mike. It was a Michael on Smallville. He's probably my favorite. It's probably my favorite live action one. But honestly, the best screen adaptation of Lex Luthor is probably still Clancy Brown from the animated series and from the Justice League cartoons. Whenever I read a Superman comic and Lex Luthor's in it, that it's Clancy Brown's voice I hear. So yeah. Still, solid work here from Mr. Holt. I think that's all the pictures that I had downloaded for this. So yeah. But even though I could probably get into this a bit more, but like I said, there's a strong possibility that I'll be doing another discussion of this with a couple of friends for my podcast, The Monster on Full, because there is a kaiju in this. But I probably wouldn't make that a public one. I would probably do that for the Patreon exclusive podcast, MIFV Max, for that one. So go join MIFV Max on Patreon if you enjoy me and want to hear me talk about kaiju. But now I'm going to get into the bits that I think really hurt the movie for me. So if you don't want to hear this, if you've been absorbing the spoilers so far, you might want to leave for this one. There is a major change in this movie. It seems like a slight divergence from established Superman lore, but I would argue that even though it seems like a small detail, it is a major change to the core of the Superman story. So at the beginning of the movie, when because like we see in the trailer, Superman is defeated. He gets knocked into the ice in the Antarctic, and Krypto takes him back to the fortress. And then he has his superhero robots, one of whom is voiced by Alan Tudyk, which made me snicker a little bit because Nathan Fillion, his buddy from Firefly, is in this as well. So the robots are tending to him, and there's some weird comedy about how they have no feelings and don't care about themselves and things like that. It's a very James Gunn sort of thing to do. Borders on nihilism, but not quite. Isn't quite there. But I guess I might be over analyzing that a little bit. But they say, oh, play the message from his parents. He finds it soothing. And it's a recording of Jor-El and Lara. Oh, by the way, I should mention, because we're in the spoiler section, Kara shows up at the end. I was a little surprised. I was actually kind of excited. It's like, oh my gosh, it's Supergirl. Well, apparently Supergirl is a party girl, and Krypto belongs to her, and she's about to go party hardy on another planet, and she seems kind of drunk when she shows up, and I'm like, really? This is the Supergirl we're going with? The irresponsible teenager that Clark is going to have to keep in line? Maybe. He doesn't really do anything with her in this one. But, okay. Not sure how to feel about that. We are supposed to get a Supergirl movie, so I kind of hope they don't stick with this characterization. Or maybe that the Supergirl movie is about her growing out of this phase, if this is really what they want to do. I wonder if I really hope it was just for jokes. By the way, there is a mid-credit scene and a post-credit scene. One is just a nice little cute shot that we've seen in a poster, and the other one is a joke. It's not really setting up anything. It's probably better that way anyway. But, I should mention, the effects in this are actually really good. Better than I was expecting. Not overdoing it with the green screening and all. There's still plenty of CGI, but it does look pretty nice overall, I would say. I wasn't put off by the effects all that much, if at all, really. But anyway. Oh, by the way, the scene where it was like, why is Superman doing nothing? Well, the context for that, this is spoiler territory, he is talking to Lois, and we see the Justice Gang dealing with an interdimensional imp in the background. He's like, oh, they got it handled, so I just want to find the dog. And they have a conversation about, she makes him hot cocoa, which is kind of nice. I think it's supposed to be a little bit funny. It's like, yeah, this thing's not worth my time. So I get it. But yeah, it doesn't come across as him being irresponsible necessarily. But anyway, the major issue we have there, so they play the message, and it's the sort you hear them say the sorts of things that you would expect Jor-El and Lara to say. Very encouraging and all that. And then we find the second half of the message is garbled, it's damaged, and they can't figure out what it says. All right. Well, then we have Lex's two super goons, the engineer, who I found out is a character from The Authority. I haven't read The Authority, so I didn't know who this was. Like, did they make this character up? Nope, she's from The Authority. And then we have Ultraman. And there's a big spoiler with Ultraman I need to get into. No, not the Japanese Ultraman. The DC Ultraman, who actually predates Japanese Ultraman by 2 years. Except I would argue this isn't the DC Ultraman. Again, that spoiler's coming. Well, the engineer pieces it all together, and then we find out that this message, the complete message that Clark never heard before, it becomes the crux of what Luthor uses to destroy Superman's reputation. Namely, or not namely, but specifically, they told their son that when he gets to Earth, because it is populated by weak beings, that he should subjugate them. Basically, they sent him there, even though they do say Krypton has been destroyed, that they're sending him there to be a conqueror, not a savior, a conqueror. And they try to, the people ask the questions like, was this fabricated or anything like that? You know, I was waiting for some sort of explanation for why it says this, that maybe there was more to the message, it was misunderstood, or it was fabricated. Like, no, there's none of that. By the time the movie is over, we haven't addressed that. It becomes basically, it plays into to the theme of identity. Clark chooses to stick with his identity as Clark, the way he was raised in Kansas, and became Superman, became a hero. He is choosing to embrace that and not what everybody else is telling him that who he is. And that's cool and all, but I hate the fact that they completely rewrote this, that James Gunn completely rewrote this, and makes his Kryptonian parents look kind of awful, paints Krypton out in a very bad light, and also makes it a little bit confusing because we say Krypton is destroyed, but we don't really get into what Krypton was like. And it seems like Krypton was popular. The Kryptonians were a race of conquerors, and it's just bizarre to me. It doesn't really make sense. I have to start asking weird questions. I do think the script, I do think, has some plot holes here and there. I'm like, what the heck is going on here? One did get addressed. One that I was concerned about did get addressed later, but so that one doesn't really count. So I can't remember what the other ones were. But I'm just like, I don't understand this. This doesn't make any sense. If they had said something about how, okay, maybe the Kryptonians were a race of conquerors, and because they kept warring with each other, they ended up destroying themselves. That's why Krypton is gone. So they, and Lara and Jor-El knew that was going to happen, so they sent Clark out in the rocket. Maybe it's just, I don't like it because it changes the fundamental of an important fundamental of the Superman story, which is that, I mean, depending on which era, because this is not in the comics as far as I know. Like, no mainstream Superman story has his Kryptonian parents set up like this. Yes, they still say, yes, we love you, son, and we want you to live, but then it's go conquer this planet after we send you there, because the people there are weak. And, you're going to have godlike powers when you're there. I don't like it because they use it as a contrast with his human parents, with the Kents, about how they basically made him who he is. And this whole thing about playing the message because he finds it soothing comes back around at the end of the movie. And he said, play the message, he finds it soothing, and it's home videos, even though I don't know how they recorded these because these were all in third person, so I'm not sure what the heck was going on with that. And so it's all these home movies of him growing up with the Kents, basically saying, and there's a point where Superman gives a speech to Lex saying, I'm human, I make mistakes, which is what being human is all about. So it's just, so not only do we have a theme of identity, we have this movie embracing Superman's humanity as embodied by the Kents, and seemingly rejecting, for lack of a better way to put it, the divine side of his heritage with the Kryptonians, because they're saying that the Kryptonians were implicitly power-hungry conquerors, and these were simple folk. And who they made him out to be is what they're choosing to do, is what he is choosing to go with. And I don't like that. What makes Superman work for me as time has gone on, and all of the Superman stories that I'm most familiar with. Now, you can point to the earliest stuff and say that doesn't work, which, by the way, Superman intervening in a war and telling both sides, and taking one of the presidents and telling him to not go invade a country, which some would say it was view as him interfering in affairs he shouldn't be interfering with. You can go back to the earliest issues of Action Comics where Superman's doing exactly that. So it is from the comics. But anyway, beside the point. But Clark is supposed to be a synthesis of both sides of his heritage. That's what makes him work as well as he does. And like I said, it calls a lot of things about Kryptonian culture into question. It calls his Kryptonian parents, their integrity and character into question. And I don't like that. Like I said, Clark is supposed to be a synthesis of both. He's both Kryptonian and he is biologically Kryptonian, but he considers himself to be human. And he is a product of both of his parents. And I feel like Gunn threw that out with this so that he could have this theme. And it doesn't work for me because I feel like he threw out a key fundamental of who Superman is. Now, does it completely destroy the character? No, it doesn't. Because his character was molded by the Kents. So I'll give him that. But even in some of the previous renditions, screen adaptations of Superman where they've played around with that, even Smallville, I don't know if this was the plan all along or if this was a retcon that they threw in there because they got pushback from fans, but they did present Jor-El in a pretty negative light for a long time. And then we find out later, oh, wait, I did that to test you, to teach you. I'm not really like that. But there was no addressing that here. So that bothered me quite a bit. Not enough to destroy the movie, but it bothered me because I did not like that take. It goes completely against what we have seen before. And like I said, I think it misses a fundamental of who Superman is. The other big spoiler I'll bring up, even though I kind of figured this was going to happen, but once it was announced that one of the super goons that we have in this movie is Ultraman, I was thinking, wait a minute, how? Because Ultraman, for those who don't know, is an alternate universe version of Superman who's evil. He's the leader of a group. I think they're called the Crime Syndicate usually. And everybody in the Crime Syndicate is an evil alternate universe version of a Justice League member. They have Owlman instead of Batman. They have, is it Superwoman? I think it's Superwoman instead of Wonder Woman, and I can't remember all their names, but you go down the list. So like, why is he here? He's not a goon. He is a full-fledged villain. It's almost like this might seem like an insane comparison, but I just thought of this. It's not unlike what they did to Bane in Batman and Robin, where Bane was a legitimate villain, but they made him the dumb muscle in that movie. Now, it isn't nearly as disrespectful here. Not nearly as bad. I'm going to have to pause here for a second. Hold on. Excuse me. I've been talking for so long, it finally caught up with me. But anyway. So like, what are we doing here? Well, then there's also a moment. This is one of what I thought was a potential plot hole here, but it gets addressed. They get Lex along with his Miss Teschmacher, who is kind of sort of cheating on Lex. Is like this selfie obsessed girlfriend, kind of cheating on Lex with Jimmy Olsen, which is kind of funny because even though she's hot, she's vapid, so he doesn't really like her. And then they leave it up to interpretation whether or not all of her selfies was her being accidentally genius or being an actual spy, because they use stuff in her selfies to unravel Luther's plot, but whatever on that. So I was like, what are we doing here with Ultraman? Well, like I said, they get into the fortress unopposed, super easy. And Superman even says later, how did you get there? That the door is tailored to my DNA. And that's when I thought, is it because it's Ultraman? Because all they say about these two is that Lex, quote unquote, made them. Now, the engineer is pretty cool because she does all these crazy things with nanites. And there's some really cool visuals with her. And they come up with some clever ways for her to use her powers to actually try to kill Superman, which I thought was interesting. Like, she tries using her nanites to fill his lungs so to suffocate him to death, which was really cool. I thought it was an interesting way to do it. I've seen people do stuff like that with Wolverine as well. Let me pause here for a second. Hello, Universal. Hi to you as well. And how are you? I'm doing fine. Just finishing up my stream here about the new Superman movie. All right. So, like, he's a clone, isn't he? Which I had been a little suspicious if they were going to try to go that route. Because, like, why else would you do this with Ultraman? And then it's confirmed later. Yeah, he's a clone. So you get to see Corn Sweat. Corn Sweat played Ultraman, too. This entire time. And interestingly, he has longer hair, so it looks kind of like 90s Superman, when he had his mullet phase in the 90s. So when we get to the big brawl at the end of it, it's Corn Sweat fighting himself, literally, because he's playing both characters. All right, okay. Kind of figured that's what they were going to do. But James Gunn, you just used the name. You only use the name because this is not Ultraman. You used the wrong name. This should have been Bizarro. Why wasn't it Bizarro? I don't know. Maybe you could start with it with Lex calling him Ultraman because it's better for PR, but then have him be Bizarro by the end. Because that makes way more sense than using Ultraman here. Once that was revealed, it was just baffling to me that they didn't do that. Lex even says he's like you, but even dumber. You did everything but use the name, Gunn. It was sitting right there. You could have made him Bizarro. Maybe even give him a few lines here and there, where he's like, me at Bizarro. And have him do his weird backwards talk and stuff like that. It's like, I don't understand why you did Ultraman and not Bizarro. Like I said, if I was script doctoring this, I probably would have made it so, like, fine, you can call him Ultraman until we get to the end, and then you're going to make him Bizarro. And I don't know maybe they could do that later, but probably not unless they make another clone or something like that, because he gets sucked into a black hole by the end of this. So unless they're going to use the black hole to make him Bizarro, he's gone. So, yeah, it was a little frustrating. It was like, just make him Bizarro. Wow, I am getting a ton of comments right now. So, so I'll go over the comments here in a second, but so I had a bit of a gripe with that, but maybe that's the comic book fan coming out. I'm sure normal people who see this aren't gonna really care. They're not even gonna know that there's a Japanese Ultraman, probably. It's really just me because I know my comic books and I'm like, why this and not this? So I fully admit, that's the thing. I can't take my comic and Superman fandom out of my evaluation of this, and look at it completely in a vacuum, if that makes sense. So those were the big things that brought the movie down for me. And I don't know, maybe I need to see it again or ponder these a little bit to kind of figure out more about of how I feel about them, because I'm coming off of this extremely fresh. Like, I just saw the movie a few hours ago. So like I said, the people I saw it with, they applauded at the end. The guy sitting next to me asked me what I thought of it. I said, I'm still processing it. Then I asked him, what did he think of it? He said that he thought it was the best Superman movie because it embraced the comic bookiness of it. And you know what? If you're watching this and you saw the early screenings tonight and that's how you feel, good on you. I'm not quite there, but yeah. Anyway, we got some more comments here, more from Universal. I saw the first test Superman screening weeks ago. I then saw the second screening a week after that. I then saw an advanced screening in Rio last week. Hot dang. Yeah, I heard about the advanced screenings in Rio where they showed about the first 30 minutes of it. All three screenings were different. I'm sure they were. I heard about that too. Cut scenes and new scenes and all of them. Yeah, I would be curious to see, hopefully when this gets released on Blu-ray and 4K, that they'll include those deleted scenes, because I would be curious to see those, because it sounds like this movie went through a lot of revisions in the editing process, from what I've heard. In the comics, the clone is called... Really? Really? Huh. Because I thought Ultraman was an alternate universe Superman. I'm a little confused now. Huh. Could have swore he was always an alternate universe. I may have to do a little research after this. It is comic accurate, huh? Anyways, I didn't like the movie. I didn't like the movies I saw. Oh. Then we have was this Maverick 77 Defender was Superman. Good. I as I said, I thought it was good, but not great. It's the Universal, I gave it a 5 out of 10. Is Superman like Hancock Will Smith? No, not at all. Shazam, probably closer to that. Is it better than Brandon Routh? That's a good question. That is a really good question. I haven't watched Superman Returns in a long time, so I don't know if I would say that. I don't know. My gut feeling says to say that it is better than Superman Returns. I don't know. I have to ponder that a little bit. For Superman, for me. Are you talking about Superman Returns? Is it better than the Smallville TV show? It's hard to compare a movie with a TV show. I don't know. I don't know what to say about that one. I think there are certain things that aren't as good as Smallville. Like I said before, I think Michael Rosenbaum, that was his name. I think that has my favorite live action Lex Luthor. So I don't think Nicholas Hoult quite got there for me. But Smallville is in the movie. Yeah, because the Kent farm. Will Reeves is in this movie? He's not. 5 out of 10. Okay, yes. And Christopher Reeve's son. Oh, okay. I don't know. Was not aware of him being in this movie. Oh, apparently it was, according to Universal. Is it better than Gal Gadot's Wonder Woman 1? I don't know. Maybe? Jason Momoa is Lobo now? He is. Yeah. Is Fantastic Four Rise of the Silver Surfer underrated? Wow, I'm just getting bombarded with questions here. I don't know if I would say it's underrated. Better than Superman 3, Superman 4. This is better than Superman 3, Superman 4. That is all. Yeah, I would say, yeah, it's better than those. Although the fact that Ultraman was cloned using hair, a strand of hair, I wonder was a bit of an homage to Nuclear Man from Superman 4. Because James Gunn's the kind of guy to do that. Have you seen the new Jurassic Park reboot? Not yet. And Universal thinks that this is better than Wonder Woman. All right. Well, I've gotten through all of the comments. So I'm going to sign off here in a moment. I've got a lot to do before I go to G-Fest this weekend. Is Supergirl 1984 underrated? I haven't seen it in years, so I can't really comment. But it does not have a great reputation. But anyway, so I'm going to be signing off here. I got a lot to do this weekend with G-Fest and all that. So if you're going to be in the Rosemont area and you're into kaiju, come over to G-Fest, say hi to me, come to any of my many panels. If you want to talk about Superman fighting kaiju, you come talk to me at G-Fest, or you can listen to an episode of Strangers and Aliens I did a few years ago. This could definitely be added to the list now if we were going to do a follow-up, because we did have a kaiju in this. Although they don't really explain how or why he got big. He just gets unleashed and he looks like Stitch from Lilo and Stitch. And then, by morning, he's kaiju sized. And they just say it's going to get bigger. I guess he's some sort of genetic abomination made by Lex that magically gets bigger. I don't know. They just let that happen. They just threw him in there. Whatever. Comic book logic. But what I'm trying to say is, come check out all that. I will in the, when I go through and do a little bit of editing and all that on this live stream. By editing, I mean like adding an end screen and all that. I will include a link somewhere on this screen where you can go watch my Man of Steel review in case you want to, get some more Superman related content from me. This is Time Portal made him bigger. I don't know about that. Anyway, this has been fun. Hopefully, this movie does well and it accomplishes what James Gunn wants it to accomplish. So, yeah. Good, but not great, ultimately, for me. All right. It's been fun. There will hopefully be more content on this channel coming to you soon. Fantastic Four is going to be out in a couple of weeks, so I will probably do another stream like this for that movie as well. See you then.